Right, let's look at global news. This very sad news. A reporter for news agency Al Jazeera has been shot and killed, allegedly by Israeli forces. The Palestinian Health Ministry says Israeli forces shot Shireen Abu Akleh in the head while she was on assignment in Jenin in the occupied West Bank. The Israel military says it was investigating the possibility that journalists had been injured, possibly by Palestinian armed gunmen. But Al Jazeera says that Shireen was assassinated in cold blood by Israeli forces. We're now joined by Africa-Asia Dialogue Senior Research Fellow Thembisa Fakude. Thembisa, thank you for being with us. As always, you were linked to Al Jazeera, and our condolences to you. I understand that you actually knew Shireen.
Yes, I did know Shireen. In fact, I worked with her husband during the inauguration of President Thabo Mbeki. So I've known the family for quite some time, and she will sorely be missed. You know, she was to the Arab world the equivalent of Liz Doucette of the BBC or Christiana Amanpour of CNN in the English-speaking audiences. So for the Arab audiences, she was akin to those two journalists, and she was much loved and extremely experienced. So it is indeed a very sad day.
And I'm sure there's just shock and horror within the organization.
Yes, there is. I've been speaking to some of my colleagues at Al Jazeera. Everyone is shocked throughout the bureaus, not only in Doha, but in the United States. As you know, Shireen was also, or carried the US citizenship. So it's quite a shock throughout the media fraternity. I've had messages also from other journalists working for different news agencies, BBC, CNN, and others who knew Shireen and worked with her over the years.
Apparently she was wearing a press vest and was standing with other journalists, so nobody should have been confused, nobody should have been pointing and firing at her. What do you make of what the Israeli military is now saying, suggesting Palestinian gunmen may have been involved? Do you think there will be any sort of definitive answer now with both sides blaming the other side?
Well, she has been in the past harassed and attacked by the Israeli army. I've had some of the footage. In fact, I was looking at those footages today when some of the soldiers tried to run her over with their vehicles. So she's been in the forefront, and she's been a target of harassment by the Israeli army. So this didn't come as a surprise. Well, it's not questionable. We know exactly who did this because they've attempted to do something similar in the past, and they continue to harass journalists, particularly those of Al Jazeera. You remember a couple of months ago, they they bombed the Al Jazeera offices in Gaza in a full view of the entire world. So there is an element of impunity within the Israeli army. So one wonders the excuse that they gave this afternoon, questioning whether that fire came from a Palestinian source. But we all know where it came from because of the history of the Israeli army in terms of how they dealt with the journalists, particularly those of Al Jazeera in the past.
The Palestinian president Mahmoud Abbas said the death was part of a broader Israeli policy of targeting journalists to blur reality and carry out crimes in silence. So you're saying that that's a credible claim that the Israeli army is actually targeting journalists, which is just horrific.
Oh, yes. I mean, they bombed the offices of Al Jazeera and other media organizations in full view of the world. So there is an element of impunity. So if they've done it in the past, what makes us doubt that they did it this time around? And they've also arrested and tortured a number of journalists, particularly the Palestinian journalists in the past. So there is little doubt that the fire came from the Israeli army. And judging by where she was hit, it looked like it was a targeted assassination.
Yeah, hit in the head. Would this be rogue soldiers then, or is there really a policy? I mean, this surely authorities would think about this making Israel look very bad on the global stage.
Well, if they do care, I think the continuation of harassment of the Palestinians on a daily basis, the bombardment of Palestinian property, homes, and other installations, suggests to me that they actually don't care. And one wonders why we should doubt if it was the Israeli army this time around, because they've done a number of atrocities within the Palestinian territories, particularly in the West Bank and in Gaza. So this has got all the trademarks of an Israeli impunity, an Israeli army that doesn't really care, that will continue treating the Palestinians as animals, as they've done in the past. So we see that continuation. And as you say, unfortunately, I'm not quite sure whether they care about brand Israel, because they continue doing what one would expect from people that care about their own image as a nation. They've continued to do the worst things and atrocities against the Palestinians. So it is expected from them, as I've said earlier on, they've done it in the past and they will continue to do so as long as the world keeps quiet when such atrocities happen, particularly in Gaza and in the West Bank.
Well, what should the world do? Finally, Al Jazeera has called on the international community to hold Israeli forces responsible. What are the chances?
Well, one expects that the Americans, who have in the past stopped all attempts towards taking Israel into account, this time around, they would at least push for justice, and they will force Israel to take certain and make certain commitments, particularly when it comes to the treatment of journalists in Gaza and in the West Bank. But the best they can do this time around, of course, is to listen to the demands of Shireen's family on what they actually hope the perpetrators should do in terms of remedying the situation that we find ourselves. I don't think it's proper nor appropriate for us as journalists to dictate to the family of Shireen what to expect or what to do moving forward. But clearly they will demand justice, and they might just demand that those that have committed this crime be brought to book and face the ultimate justice.
All right, thank you very much for your time. Thembisa Fakude, Africa-Asia Dialogue Senior Research Fellow.